Well, thank you very much, Scott. In many ways, I think the big news in the past 2 months has been really the Student Success Task Force under the able leadership of one of your members, Dr. Peter McDougall. I made 3 appearances last week to open sessions. One was a town hall meeting in Central California at Fresno City College. Another meeting was before the Academic Senate in San Diego. And then on Friday, I was at the Student Senate, and I see Kevin Feliciano in the audience, and that was a very enjoyable experience. And in all cases, we heard a lot, and we were able to absorb quite a bit, answered a lot of questions, and we feel one of the things that the Student Success Task Force did is to come up with 22 draft recommendations. And I underline the word draft because it was our idea to go out to a lot of different groups to get feedback and then to meet again, which we will be meeting, incidentally, on Wednesday of this week here in Sacramento, and we have another meeting scheduled for December 7th. So we'll be, giving some careful attention to the input that we've received, and in turn, we will eventually, of course, our aim is to have recommendations ready for this body in January, because that's what the bill, Senate Bill 1143, called for, was that they said that the task force would meet and then present their recommendations to the Board of Governors in January and then report to the legislature in March. One of the things we keep emphasizing is, number one, right now our recommendations are only draft recommendations. And secondly, once even this body adopts those recommendations, they don't exactly become immediately effective. For one thing, there are 3 different ways in which these recommendations could be enacted. One, in some cases, it would require legislation, and so naturally, we would have to present through some legislator's effort some of the recommendations. Secondly, some of them would be regulations that would be reviewed and acted upon by this board. And thirdly, in some cases, it's merely encouraging best practices. It doesn't follow that, for instance, we say in there that one of our first recommendations is that there be a closer interaction between high schools and community colleges and for teachers of the various disciplines to interact with their high school counterparts. Well, we're not going to mandate that and review that, but we do feel it would be a great practice to implement. So we need to keep in mind that these recommendations are, number one, not in the final form, and number two, all of them will call upon some subsequent action, which may take quite some time. I did go, as I said, I went to 3 different appearances. I've also appeared before the CEO board, the CCC board, the CTA convention, and the Campaign for College Opportunity, and I'm scheduled to be at the Northern California Town Hall meeting, which will be in Oakland a little bit later. I want to compliment Paul Feast, our new vice chair. I don't know that he's so new, but he's been with us several months. He's been very effective in getting me to meet with editorial boards. I met with the Sacramento Bee last week on Monday, and then on Wednesday when I was in Fresno, I met with the Fresno Bee, and then on Thursday, I met with the San Diego Union Tribune. And in all cases, I thought the reception was quite good. In fact, there was an article that came out in Friday in the San Diego Union Tribune. Constance Carroll, the Chancellor of the San Diego Community College District, went with me, and I thought the article was quite favorable in the kinds of recommendations that we're making. I also have a scheduled appearance before the Los Angeles Times editorial board on November 30th, the same day that the foundation board will be meeting, and when I'm through with that editorial meeting, I'll come on over to the foundation board and sit in on that. I will explain one thing. In the last 2 months, I had the interesting experience of serving on a jury. Now, I'd been called to jury duty before, and I wasn't selected, but this time I was. I guess I told the truth, and so I didn't get out of and it was a 4-week, it was a civil trial, so you can imagine I was doing a lot of calling during the noon break. We were off on Fridays, so I could be in the office on that, but it did dip into my work a little bit. I guess I have to mark it up as doing my civic duty, and I won't have to do that again for 18 months. It was a very interesting experience, and except for the time it took, I found it to be worthwhile, and I have a greater appreciation for the American judicial experience. I was in New York City a week before last I've been appointed to an advisory panel of community college presidents throughout the nation. There's about 10 of us on this panel, and I got a lot of great ideas from the College Board on the whole college completion agenda. This idea of student success is not something peculiar only to California. It's more or less the main topic that I hear discussed throughout the nation among community colleges. Last Monday, October 31st, we met with the Little Hoover Commission and collaborated with them. They've been discussing community colleges, and I think overall we're going to be rather pleased with their recommendations that they come out concerning the community college. I think they too have been impressed with the work of the Student Success Task Force. On occasions, I do meet with the entire staff, and we had a meeting on October 24th with the entire staff, and I went through some details about the Student Success Task Force, and we also discussed this particular document. We took a survey of our staff and just to measure their responses on a whole host of things, and we have shared this, well, we shared it with the entire staff, but particularly with our managers to make sure that they are open to any suggestions, criticisms, or whatever. It was pointed out that the survey this time was a little more favorable than the survey that had been taken, I think it was 4 years ago. Is that right, Steve? 5 years ago. But Steve pointed out that there's been such turnover in our office that it's sometimes a little difficult to compare. I'll just share with you briefly some statistics that our Vice Chancellor of Institutional Research, Patrick Perry, gave me. The fall enrollment this year in 2011, the head count is down by 4.2%, but the full-time equivalent students, that is we call FTES, is down 3.4%. Now, remember that our funds were cut by 5%, and as a result of that, the legislature and the governor permitted us to reduce our course offerings by 5%. I can tell you for sure that the head count would not have been down if we had had the kind of resources that we really need. The demand is great, but the supply is a little thin. And so what we have to do, all the colleges have engaged in this simply because they don't have the resources. And you know, each district, community college district, has a cap. And if they go beyond that cap, they are educating students without any remuneration. So most colleges have had to, as a result of this fiscal scarcity, have had to reduce their course offerings. I'm sure that the two of you who are serve on a local board of trustees understand this problem quite well. And I'm very familiar with it because I recall when I served as president of Pasadena City College one year, we got absolutely no increase in enrollment and no increase in money. And so because we had exceeded our cap considerably the year before, we had to cut back on our course offerings. And that's happening all up and down the state of California. Personally, I think this is a tragedy for the future of California because the more students we educate, the better the economy of California will be. All the statistics that I read make it extremely clear that one's future earnings are closely tied with the degree of education that one possesses. It's just a steady upward curve. You can start with those who drop out of high school those who get only a high school diploma, those who include some college, those who get the associate degree, those who get the bachelor's degree, and master's and doctorate and professional degrees. There's a correlation, a very strong correlation between earnings and one's college education. Also, it's very clear that the more education you have, the less likely you are to be out of work. The unemployment rate is extremely high, over 15% among those that are high school dropouts. So I just share those statistics with you. Last year, our transfers at CSU went up sharply because you may recall that in the spring semester the year before, CSU cut off its transfers. So this, in 2009-10, we had 56,959 students who in 2010-11, excuse me, 56,959, and the year before we only had 37,674. And once again, there were outside influence in terms of why there's a variation. I think that's the highest, if I'm not mistaken. I believe Patrick shared that with me. This past year was the highest number of transfers that we've ever had to California State University, which happens to be the main recipient of our transfers. Now, we have a lot of transfers to University of California, a lot of transfers to private universities, and also a considerable number of transfers that go to the for-profits, such as the University of Phoenix. We have some who transfer out of state. But I thought those are just some statistics that I thought you might like. And if anybody has any questions about any part of my report, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Any questions for the Chancellor? Member McDougall.
Not a question, Chancellor, but just to reiterate your sadness with the figure of the drop-off in enrollment, the drop-off in full-time students. I don't think we can do enough to promote how the state of California is being ill-served by the inability of our colleges to accommodate the demand that exists. And I know you do a wonderful job about this, about doing that, but I just want to reinforce, to me, that is the central issue that may lead to greater responsiveness for the system. And I just think we can't beat the drum enough on how critical it is to the state and to those human beings that they have access to our institutions. So.
Well, thank you for that comment, Member McDougall. I think you're right on. And I would encourage members of the Board of Governors, when you're in conversation with legislatures or in the public in general, point out that really California is making a serious mistake. We know that revenues in the state are down, and we'll hear a report on that a little bit later. And so we may even take an additional cut this year. But this to me is a short-range action that's going to have long-range impact. It's not going to be good. When you think of one year we turned away 140,000 students, we probably turned away over 200,000 last year. Now, when you think about those students, some of whom, even though they can postpone their education, some will never get their education. And we have really confined them to a life of less money, less appreciation for many of the cultural and historical things that you gain from a college education, and really all the evidence points to the fact that they make not quite as good as citizens when they're not as well informed. And some of the social cost, when we look at the cost of welfare, the cost of incarceration, those are also tied to these kinds of decisions. So I would like to underline that whenever you get an opportunity, our public officials need to be reminded that we're making a mistake. We and the community colleges, and I'm struck by that when I go from community college to community college, are rather heroically doing the best we can with the limited resources that we get. But we could do a great deal more, and we know we could do a great deal more if we had more resources. So that's certainly something that I appreciate your saying, Peter, because that's something we just got to keep beating the drums about, not in a whining way, but more in a way of saying, Do you realize how much more we could serve the state of California if we just had the resources?
Member McDougal.
Just to add one addition to the comments, Chancellor, and I know you're very much aware of this, but I say it as much to remind myself that in addition to the state, what it's costing students to seek alternatives, we see a level of indebtedness that has never been approached before of individuals who are finishing or not finishing their degrees of $25,000 on average, which is an incredible expense to have. And many of us were able to attend universities and go through the process when there was very little cost compared to what it is today. So not only is the generation today being denied access to the extent that it existed before, but they are paying to a much greater extent that is having a negative impact on them as they begin their lives. And we're not serving this generation as well as we were served, and it's disturbing, but I just think we have to keep reminding ourselves and do what we can to change.
Other questions or comments for the Chancellor? Okay, thank you, Chancellor.